twice a week so far.
Good.
All right, I want to get started. I want to be cognizant of time and make sure that folks have meetings after, they're able to join those. As the kind of discussion goes on, please, for people that are attendees, jump into the chat, ask questions. When I spoke to Dr. Scott and Dr. Turner, who I'm going to let introduce themselves, they're okay with going with the flow and seeing where the conversation takes us. So if there are particular topics that anybody wants to hear about, please just let us know. So I'm Brittney McFadden. I will be moderating with our fireside chats. I always like to make the joke that like the less that I talk, the better. So who we really want to hear from today is Dr. Turner and Dr. Scott. So hopefully I do very little talking, but we have some questions that are prepared for them. And then I'll kick it over to Dr. Scott to do a quick introduction.
Sure. So my name is Carjamin Scott, and I am so glad to be here representing the Tennessee State University, and I serve as Director of Admissions and Recruitment.
Hi, and I'm Kara Turner. I'm Vice President for Enrollment Management and Student Success at Morgan State University.
And if you all don't mind, I know that, job titles, it kind of tells you a little bit about what folks do, but in your role, in terms of day to day, and I know that we talked a little bit about this before the attendees were on the call, what's top of mind for you two in your particular roles at this moment and at this time of the year? I think it'll give some insight besides just the titles that we all see in terms of, what's your daily reality?
Yeah, so I'm happy to go first. In my role, I oversee two teams, an admissions team, which processes applications, and a recruitment team, which is forward-facing or virtual-facing, since we're navigating the pandemic. And what's top of mind is ensuring that our students get the same level of customer service even while we navigate this uncertain time. I'm blessed and honored to work for an outstanding AVP, Mr. Terrence Izzard, and a President Glenda Baskin Glover. And so we share the same vision and goals for the university, which is to have students who start school, stay in school, and graduate. So although my role is limited to admitting and helping kids with getting started, we want to increase our entire enrollment population and ensure that our future Tigers are destined for success.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And I oversee a number of offices, from everything from getting the students in through admissions and recruitment, through financial aid, advising, all the way to graduation. So I see the recruitment end as well as the student success end. And so top of mind right now, one is, of course, rebuilding from the pandemic. We didn't take too much of an enrollment hit, certainly not as much as we were concerned about taking, but rebuilding. And working with students to get through, right? Because this time has been hard. And so the adjustment to coming back to campus, and for some students coming to campus for the first time, our sophomores, many of them haven't been on campus, or, the students will be sophomores this coming year. And so really just working with all the students, with the staff, with the faculty, everyone to adjust to hopefully getting back pretty close to normal.
No, I think when you both talked about future Tigers or the sophomore students, that's obviously, with the team here at Unibuddy, that's our kind of focus, is that student experience. So in terms of, the peer-to-peer pieces, and I know that we'll get to this. I think I was talking about, I believe it was Howard that had, they usually do like an 11-day orientation for students. So one of our biggest things, how can you still have that connected and human experience, especially for HBCUs? There's such an emotional, personalized, authentic attachment to those institutions. And how do you build that for those sophomores, right, that are returning to campus? And how do you build that for your next class? Because we're always thinking about that. So I'm really excited. I have a ton of, we have some questions. I'm really excited to hear what you all particularly have been doing. And this is just, really quick when we were talking about that piece. This is more on the Unibuddy side, but when we think about those peer-to-peer connections, we know how integral they are for the students, whether that's connecting with students, other students, whether that's connecting with staff or whether that's connecting to alum, again, particularly with HBCUs and the legacy behind it and the strong alum base. Shout out to the VP right now. We know that's important to put those students in contacts with them. And we see that with HBCUs, you all have been able to do that really, really well. So we're excited. Hopefully folks on the call can kind of glean some insight from you both, talking us through how you were able to do that in whichever format that you might have done it. There, really quick, I will jump to kind of just get right into the questions that we all have and start pretty big with, obviously it's been tumultuous in a lot of different ways this past year and even currently. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like in terms of your roles and working with students while still trying to obviously pay attention to everything that's going on in the world? We don't want to ignore that, right? We want to support students holistically, but you also are building a class and there are all these other different things you have to do. So how are you all able to kind of navigate what's happening and, still kind of focus on those enrollment goals that you have set out?
It was a lot.
I started with the largest, biggest question that I could. Let's just get into it immediately.
I think it's important to really recognize that this year has been a lot. This whole pandemic thing has been a lot for everybody.
Yeah.
My team, we call ourselves Team No Sleep. Which we would do periodically, as the year ebbs and flows. Different offices have their peak times, but this past year felt like the whole year was Team No Sleep, right? Because it was just so much, to do, to go from being in person and everything's in person, and literally overnight you're switching to everything online and having to figure out how to accommodate your students, how to get your new students, how to get new students when they can't come to campus and they can't have their orientation experience and they can't have all of the things that drive them to want to come to your institution. Helping staff, right? Because everybody was going through the same things, right? Whether we're talking the pandemic or whether we're talking all the everything crazy that was going on in the country, it's been a lot. But you have goals in mind and things we have to do, and so you put in the work to get them done.
And I think what you're highlighting there too is like you have a strong team, right? Like Team No Sleep. At
Absolutely.
least you all are kind of in it together and on the same path. And I think that makes a huge difference. But yeah, that's great. Go ahead, Dr. Scott.
Yes, and just to echo Dr. Turner, she's absolutely right in everything she mentioned. We experienced the exact same thing with a focus on staff. So when we first heard about the pandemic occurring, of course, through the news, and then a task force was created that was comprised of university leaders as well as other healthcare professionals. We sat down as a leadership team and we figured out, okay, how is this going to affect our staff? And how can we give our staff what they need to meet said goals? Because if our cups are empty, then how can we pour into our students? Mm-hmm. And so we identified what those needs were. We ensured that we were able to work in a virtual model. We transitioned some of our processes that could be done externally. And then we made adjustments to create a hybrid model so that things wouldn't fall by the wayside, that we had no other choice but to do, like collecting the mail or sending out mail. So we were able to make the adjustments needed. And it has been the best term I can think of is a blessing, because now we are better equipped for the future. Our post-pandemic admissions department is going to be, and is currently so much stronger than our pre-pandemic admissions and recruitment department.
I love that. That actually goes kind of into my second question. As if we didn't have enough to deal with the pandemic, obviously we were, this past year and a half, getting into a new presidency. We had the Black Lives Matter movement, which obviously at an HBCU, but across the country was impacting folks. I know me, just even, I'm not in college or university, but there were some days at work where I was like, how can I focus knowing what's going on there in the world. But you know, we saw still with HBCUs, you all were kind of able to keep your enrollment numbers well, and some schools even saw a spike. And you know, folks are thinking that the BLM movement kind of really reinvigorated how folks feel about HBCUs. So how do you all kind of plan? I know Dr. Scott, you know, for example, you said you're going to be better. How do you all plan to keep that momentum, to keep HBCUs in everyone's forefront of their mind, not just this year because of everything that's happened, but you know, we've always been here. So how do we kind of keep that ball rolling and keep that momentum, you know, looking forward?
I think what we've done as a department is we've met students where they are. We have created our own social media accounts. We have followed great leaders. I had mentioned Mr. Izzard and President Glover, and we ensure that all of our students, you mentioned the election, our student leaders worked to ensure that the entire student body was registered to vote. So we participated in that. We recognize how important the movement BLM, Black Lives Matter is. HBCUs have always mattered and have always valued Black lives. So we will continue to do what we were built to do, which is teach students who were left out of the system of education just because of the color of their skin. But the benefit of having movements such as the Black Lives Matter movement is it helps us to reinvigorate why that is so important and why we need to ensure that we have these safe spaces for our children, our Black kids, minority kids, underserved communities to thrive.
Such a good point, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, we have a digital billboard on campus, right? You know, that scrolls signs. And we put up, I think this was probably after Freddie Gray, which happened in Baltimore, right? Our president, I think, came up with that, Dr. David Wilson, I think came up with it, and it scrolls around and it says Morgan State University, where Black lives have always mattered. Right. And that is so powerful to me. It's so powerful every time I drive by it and see that. And I think, you know, the thing is to keep all this publicity that we're getting now is to keep building on it. Right. Which is why I'm doing things like this. Right. I mean, honestly, you know, it seriously, like we got to keep the focus. The focus is now on us. And so it's incumbent on us to keep that focus for as long as we can. You know, we know the American attention span is short and there'll be a new cause soon, but we have to do everything that we can to keep the focus on the great work that we've always done, right? Yeah. And now people are just discovering it. So we want to spread the word as loudly and as widely as we can while the spotlight is on us, which will hopefully keep the spotlight shining on us and all the great work that all of our institutions do.
Definitely. You both are more, you know, positive about it than me. I was like, come on, of course, this has always been going on. But I think you're right. Continuing to kind of, you know, do conversations like this just to educate folks and know, you know, always been here, but let's keep it at the forefront and let's not forget. One of the other things I've talked a lot to folks in admissions and enrollment, and one of the big things that people are kind of a blessing in disguise, I know we mentioned that from the pandemic, is access has actually been a little bit different. So being able to reach students that they were not able to reach before because they weren't invested in their virtual and their digital engagement, right? Maybe I'm from Brooklyn, maybe I would have never gone to a student Q&A at Tennessee State because that maybe I wanted to go to campus and I only looked at those schools, but now I'm like, they have all of these resources for me in Brooklyn if I wanted to consider this HBCU. So can you talk to me about, did you see that as well for you all in terms of the increased access, and kind of what are your plans to continue to leverage that?
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit that right on the head. My team and I, we have all these hashtags. So first hashtag is hashtag Team No Sleep. The second one is hashtag COVID Progress, right? Which in the light of all the horrible things about this pandemic, there are so many things, I think Dr. Scott mentioned this, that have come out of this that we would have not been doing for the next 10 years probably if this hadn't come along and pushed us to do them, like virtual tours, right? We had started putting the groundwork to it. Well, when all of a sudden you can't bring students to campus, and that's the number one way to drive students to you got to come up with something real quick, right? So we had to real quickly finish the virtual tour process, right? That's something that's not going to change, right? Even when we go back to doing in-person tours, that option will still exist now. That hasn't. Another thing, when you talk about access, I'm thinking about test optional, right? That's something our president had been talking about. Oh, Dr. Turner, I think we need to look at this test optional. And me and my team were like, oh, but we got this tied to that and this tied to that. And what about my retention rates and all of this? And all of a sudden, what? Students can't take the SAT. Guess what? We're test optional. That's another thing that is likely, right? I can't say for sure yet, but is likely to continue, very possibly to continue. So I think there's a lot of things in terms of access that have been good and that we certainly are exploring, but many of them that we know for sure we're going to keep at this point.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yes, the same definitely applies to Tennessee State. I'm really privileged that with our virtual events, our alumni love them. Miss Audrey Stratford, who's the vice president of the Alumni Association, they show up and they show out. And when you are able to engage other audiences and support departments, as well as change your visibility to this new virtual format, I think that's a win-win across the campus. So we will definitely continue hosting our virtual events. We're also test optional as well, and we've seen great results from that. And believe it or not, although we're test optional, there are some students who have still taken the ACT and the SAT, and we do encourage them to submit those scores if they have them. But if they don't, we don't want the pandemic to serve as a penalty, right? Like if they haven't taken it because of where their region is, some regions completely canceled the test, like Atlanta, for example. It's quite different than Florida. Well, Georgia is quite different than Florida. So we are looking at ways to continue with the processes that work.
Yeah. I love that you both were like, we had to do this immediately. We always thought about, because that's been one of my favorite parts, being at Unibuddy, and we are a digital tool, right? Is that things that I know for a fact working in higher ed would take like a committee to purchase it. And it's like, by the time we find the solution, it's not even what we need anymore. I was really, really proud to see people just move super quickly and, just be innovative and think outside the box. So that's something that I was really, really pleasantly surprised to see. And I hope that it continues. And it sounds like from most folks I talk to that it is. So it's just exciting. I think it's going to be good for the profession in general and ultimately very, very good for the students. So that's good. We do have a question here. Like I said, we're happy to jump in and answer these as we go through. This person said, HBCUs have had a lot of exciting news lately. Big name donors. I think, I forgot, was it Amazon gave? There's been a bunch of different people that have given tons of money. In terms of donations, outperforming other colleges in terms of enrollment, shout out there, and a vice president, HBCU alumna. What are some other lesser known stories that you all have heard on campus that you're excited about and that you want others to know? Even I would also want to know just like any historical pieces as well when we talk about haven't always been here, if there's any of those that you want to share, but yeah.
Yeah, so I can give you 2 stories and 1 fun fact about TSU.
Okay.
So 2 cool stories is, one, this past, maybe about 3 months ago, the owners of a pizza chain called Slim and Husky's, one of the owners, his name is Cliff, they opened another restaurant. They have several pizza chains across the country, but they opened the first African-American owned or Black owned pizza chain in Nashville, in our Broadway area of Nashville, Tennessee, which is significant news, should make nationwide news. They made history. Another piece of news is Miss Lakeisha, or Dr. Lakeisha Simmons, was recently featured in Business Week and People magazine as well for her work in helping women become financially free. She discusses how she helped them become financially free after divorce. So those are our local alumni doing outstanding things. There's everyday people doing great things who have graduated from Tennessee State. So those are the 2 quick stories that need to hit headline news. And then the fun fact is we celebrate our Founders Day during the homecoming exercises in October. However, we're actually founded on Juneteenth. So if someone in the chat can share what Juneteenth is, what date that is, I would be impressed, because I worked at another institution and they didn't know what Juneteenth was. And so whenever I get the chance to talk about that day, and use that slang in my vocabulary, I like to use it.
I would hope someone from Unibuddy tell us, because we actually get that day off. It's a recognized holiday within the company. And, when I write my away message, I make sure to explain the historical context there. So I see folks are chiming in and they do know, but that's excellent. I love that. Dr. Turner?
Sure. I see someone put in the chat, we were one of the recipients of the very generous gifts from Mackenzie Scott.
That's the name I was
I think that's what you were referencing
yeah,
with Amazon.
I do not want to say Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. I will not do that.
Yes. And so that was certainly very, very exciting. Also, one of our former students, he actually never graduated, but he's just done extraordinarily well for himself. Calvin Tyler and his wife Tina gave the university another $20 million. They had already given the money, university money previously. We have a building. In fact, the building behind me is named after them. But they just gave us, shortly after the Mackenzie Scott, another $20 million gift, much of it which will be used for student scholarships. So we're really excited about the resources that are coming to the university. And just a story real quick about our students, because our students are so amazing. They just are. We recently had 4 students compete in it was something Goldman Sachs did, some kind of challenge that they did, and they as a team won $500,000 for the university. Oh, wow. Yeah. So real proud of that, and looking forward to, and those students, by the way, the president has already said they will have scholarships coming from that money.
I would hope so.
Whatever else the money gets used for, they will have, their bills will be paid for the remainder of their time in the university.
That's excellent. And I mean, you two are both lighting up talking about your alums and your current students. And we know that they're the best cheerleaders. They're the best folks to help when it comes to enrollment and recruitment and outreach. Talk to us a little bit about how do you get these alums and your current students involved with that, and getting prospective students who might have never considered an HBCU. Or I'm in the Northeast, there's not as many, or it's in New York there aren't. So how do you get folks to get more educated about it using your alums and also using your current students to kind of get them to understand the importance, the legacy, and actually see them on those campuses?
So we have a really robust alumni base. We have an alumni staff person in our admission office that works with alumni as the liaison to really build up and help train alumni to go do college fairs and do high school visits for us. Our alumni association chapters are great, and so we even have alumni who live in the Caribbean, some that live overseas, and they'll do international fairs for us that, would be cost prohibitive for us to do. So, I think when you have a great product, right, and people have a great experience at your institution, they want to share that. They want to give back. And so we have great alumni who do that. Our current students are just, they're the best salespeople there are, right?
I agree.
And I'm sure Tennessee, the state does this too, have students do your tours, right? Your campus tours, because they're going to sell it the best. And we also have a number of alumni who work at the institution. And in fact, our assistant director of admissions is an alum. And, again, when you've been there, you've had the experience, right? You're able to sell that in a way that others can't. So, it's just key that our students have great experiences so that they want to go out and share and help others come.
Definitely. I always tell people, you don't know what it's like on campus, like past 10 p.m. as a staff member. I don't know if they really want to talk to you. They got other questions they might want to ask that they don't want to ask you. So how about you?
That's right. I probably don't want to know about.
You don't want to know. You don't need those problems. You got enough to do. Team no sleep, right? So put them off. Talk to the current students. I like that route a lot. Go ahead, Dr. Scott. What about you?
Yes, I am so proud of all of our current students and alumni. We will soon announce our Dr. Levi Watkins students. He was a alumnus of Tennessee State. I always get that word confused. He graduated from Tennessee State, and he was the first to successfully implant an automatic defibrillator in a human patient. So if you know anything about or have heard of a pacemaker, we owe a debt of gratitude to Dr. Watkins, and his family donated a significant amount of money so that we could have the TSU to Meharry accelerated program, because we are aiming to produce more Black physicians and dentists. We also have Robert Covington, who gave back. He was recently featured in the NBA All-Star Game, and he donated $1 million towards a men's and women's basketball facility. Hersey Miller is about to start at Tennessee State. He's Master P's son. He's going to start this fall. And Master P is rumored to plan to move to Nashville and has already rumored to want to give back to Nashville, although his son hasn't even graduated yet. Wow. So now is the time to choose an HBCU. And of course, we want you to choose Tennessee State, but I recognize that Dr. Turner is here. So just choose, just choose an HBCU.
I was going to say, I don't think I've ever been on a webinar where Master P came up. So Dr. Scott, I really thank you for that, because that brought me joy today. We have another question here. And so in light of Ibram Kendi's How to Be Anti-Racist, that's a really popular book when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement and folks really trying to, educate themselves and creating different recommended reading lists. What institutional/structural obstacles have specifically held back or continue to kind of hinder the kind of prominence of and progress for HBCUs?
I think that we could always use more resources that would help us with moving forward. I think that the question regarding the Black Lives Matter movement and the announcement of Vice President Kamala Harris, who is an HBCU grad, earning her title, has helped us with our visibility. I think that we will continue to move forward with such publicity and with more resources. I feel that we are doing a great job, but it's always an opportunity for us to improve.
So I would add to that, and I agree with what Dr. Scott said. I would add to that perception, right? There's still while we know we do a great job, and we can document that, we could talk about that for days about the great job that we do. You still have, in some areas, guidance counselors who don't have the best perception, right? You sometimes have even parents who, you just have a lot going on in terms of what people's perceptions are sometimes of our institutions. And so being able to move beyond that. And that's why this spotlight is so important, right? This spotlight and this taking advantage of this moment that is here now to help people who may have a misunderstanding of our institutions, right? That may think they know things that they absolutely do not know about our institutions, so that everyone can see our institutions for the amazing institutions that they are.
Definitely. And I think too, the perception piece is just so big. It kind of feels like there needs to be like some type of national campaign where we're just knocking on doors and really educate. Because I think for me, when I saw, HBCUs get in the spotlight in terms of enrollment numbers, it was written as if this was new or like they were just had come around, which we know is not to be the case. So I think the kind of the presence and the perception, hopefully keep the ball rolling, like we all said earlier, with the momentum so that we can change that and address it. We have another question here. I love it. Keep the questions going. What did you speak to how you utilize the HBCU caravan? And I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if that's a particular thing or if they mean kind of the network of HBCUs for outreach and recruitment and the success of that initiative. So it does sound like maybe it's potentially a program. Are you either one of you familiar with it? I guess to switch it on a similar question that I was already thinking of asking that's similar to this is, can you talk about how HBCUs, in terms of all of them, networks, obviously you both are from two different institutions, and Dr. Scott held back and saying, come to Tennessee State, because you were on the call, which we can appreciate, but what does the collaboration look like, or the shared resources, or, what do those ties and those relationships look like with other HBCUs throughout the country?
So from my perspective, they are getting stronger I know I've had a great relationship. We had a Lumina Foundation grant where we were collaborating with Howard University and Dillard University on student success initiatives. It was a fantastic collaboration, and we shared so much. We learned so much from each other. We helped each other build infrastructure and build student success infrastructure at our universities. I believe we worked with Tennessee State, I think, on the UNCF Career Pathways Initiative. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for our institutions, but there's a HBCU Student Retention Summit. Dr. Nfume, my assistant vice president, is not going to be happy with me because I can't remember the exact name of that right now, but there's a summit of HBCUs that are focusing on retention that all meets on the Eastern Shore in the spring. So there are a number of ways in which our institutions collaborate. And of course, there's always room to do more.
Yep. That's excellent. I didn't realize it would be on the retention piece and student success, but that makes a lot of sense in terms of following those best practices and just being able, a lot of what we do is stealing from what other folks are doing that works. So that makes, a lot of sense that particular piece you're all able to collaborate on. What about you, Dr. Scott?
Yes, what's top of mind for me right now, and it's probably because I just got out of a meeting with Dean Merle, is the TSU to Meharry partnership. And that partnership has helped us produce students who have GPAs over 3.5 and SATs over 1310 and ACTs over 28 in the middle of a pandemic. Nice. And that partnership is significant because it's going to help us create history in the type of students that we are recruiting and the type of programs to attract said students. So partnerships are important. And what Dr. Turner had mentioned about the different trainings that are available, HBCUs, we gather together and we have those trainings together. And also our graduates may leave TSU and sometimes go to other HBCUs that offer graduate programs as well. So we have those partnerships as well.
If we're ever allowed to gather in person and there's an HBCU conference, I would like to go because that's probably the most fun higher ed conference there could be. So please keep me in mind if that ever happens in the near future. We did have a question in the chat really quick from Shamel. What is the role and importance that you all place on diversity at HBCUs? And I know this is a question a lot of people kind of are curious about, right? When we talk about perception or just a lack of understanding. So I would love to, for you all to kind of speak to what diversity means at a HBCU and then what you all do particularly to make sure that your respective institutions are staying diverse.
Yeah, so I love that question. I'm going to give this caveat that although we're an HBCU, we don't only have Black students, and Black students are not a monolith. Right, Black students are not a monolith. So every Black student you see is not the same. So we represent diversity because we just are all different. But in addition to that, we do have offices dedicated specifically to giving support to students, say international students or military students or adult learners. Or transfers. That represents diversity and diverse audiences as well. And we are committed to creating an environment of belongingness and inclusion for all students, no matter what walks of life they come from.
Love that. Thank you for that, Mythbuster, because you'd be surprised. I know some people think, and it's like, that's not the way that works. So thanks for getting right into it immediately. Dr. Turner, what about you?
That was extremely well said. And because it's such a myth, yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, right now we're about 10% non-African American. And if you look at graduate programs, it's more than that. And we have actually been higher than that percentage of non-Black. International students have actually gone down, right? Enrollment has gone down with international students from the political climate under the previous administration, as well as the pandemic. So, certainly we are diverse, and I think that is so critical so that even within our Black people, we're diverse, right? Mm-hmm. You have whole subcultures, right? And so it's a place for everyone on our campus. And I think it's really important to know, not only are we not all Black now, but we have always been open to others, right? Even when other institutions were not open to us, and we were founded for that reason, we have always been open, right? And that's just really important. I think beyond that, you know, and this gets tricky sometimes, right? Because there are people who get concerned that we're going to move too far away from the Black part of the historically Black there, right? But I think one is that we'll always be historically Black no matter what, and that will always be a part of our culture no matter what. But the reality is, if we're going to grow, right, just raw numbers, demographics, right, we have to be diverse. We have to embrace diversity. The fact is we embraced it anyway, but for those who might wish we embraced it a little less, the reality is if you want to see our institutions grow, we're going to have to be diverse because the demographics are simply not there for us to continue to build and get more robust and get stronger and get more influential and just be limited to a Black population. But again, that's never been our only goal, right?
I think I know, and it seems very simple. So thank you both for, you know, answering that. But I think that is one of those things that in terms of perception, people don't really actually realize, right? And like you said, you're going to always be historically Black, but demographics are going to change and we're going to have to adapt, and especially our colleges and universities. So that was fantastic. Other question that we have here in the Q&A piece, what would you say are kind of top 3 needs for HBCUs that the higher education community just as a whole can help with or support?
That's a good question.
Take your time. You don't have to answer immediately. Let it remain.
I mean, yeah, resources is always number one. Right?
Yep.
Now, I mean, right now, you know, with all the federal money coming in from the CARES Act and all that stuff and all the great focus from all the private donors, you know, so resources are feeling right now a little bit less of an issue, but historically and until right now when all this money's coming in, and as soon as all this money is gone, because the federal money is certainly going to dry up real soon, resources is the number one challenge that we have. We know what to do. We know how to do it. But, you know, you need to have the number of people, the staff that you need, and the technology that you need, and the buildings and the infrastructure and all of that you need. So certainly number one is resources.
Definitely.
Number 2, I would actually put as, again, that perception piece and respect, and just the realization of how strong our institutions are, that we often are not given credit for. Right. I see things, you know, I see some institutions come up with these innovations and I'm like, we've been supporting things like that for the past 50 years. Right.
I love that. What about you, Dr. Scott? Anything outside, I guess, what Dr. Turner said, resources, perception piece, all of those?
Yes, I agree with 1 and 2. So I'll just add 3 and 4 because we're flowing so well. I would say 3 would be community, making sure that our community knows that we are in their neighborhood and that we're giving back to them just like they're continuing to give back to us. I feel like that's how campuses truly thrive. And we're doing a great job of that at Tennessee State. And then number 4, it's hard because it probably falls under resources, because I was going to say facilities, which would fall under resources. So just improving our infrastructure and facilities to ensure that we're cutting edge and we're meeting the needs of today's students.
Excellent. Yeah, the town and gown piece is, I think, something that's so overlooked. I mean, there's some very elite institutions, and they have nothing to do with the surrounding area. And the surrounding area could be full of minority community or whatever it might be, and they just really don't want much to do with that. And they're proud to have, you know, those gates. So I think HBCUs are in a position where, with the mission and the reason that they exist, have a different approach to the surrounding community. It can really work more collaboratively and don't see it as 2 separate things. Like, yeah, we're in this town, but the university has nothing to do with it. It's like, well, you're in this town, you have everything to do with the community. So I love that you added that piece because I think that's often forgot. Other question that we got, what were some of your best ideas that got your institutions through the pandemic, and what didn't work and why? So you can share just one thing that didn't work if we don't want to tell about all the things that might have flew off the handles. That might be too much for us this afternoon. But if you can share one thing that you were like, we thought it was going to be a good idea and it just did not, but also your best ideas too. I think, especially Dr. Turner, you saying we've been supporting students like this all the time with the innovation. We want to make sure that people are walking away with some of the things that you all have been doing, which is clearly working very well.
Yes, so I can give an example that will cover both sides of that coin. How it was a best practice, but it was also kind of bad. We tweaked it. So we made it work. We made it work. We started an admitted student Facebook group. And at first we were able to allow students to say whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, and we sort of let everybody in the group, but we had to tweak it. Whereas we sort of filter what is said and filter the audience, because people who weren't admitted were trying to get into the group, and people were asking questions that had nothing to do with admissions and TSU. They were like selling candles and stuff. So we had to, it worked, it's good, but we had to tweak it to make it work better.
Excellent. Dr. Turner?
One of the things I think that really worked for us is we have a really good in-person summer orientation program. It's 4 days, 3 nights. There are field trips. There's a movie everyone has to watch and discuss, and there, all the usual sessions you would have. But it's also about a cultural building, right, and a cultural foundation. So it's a really strong orientation. And it was like, wow, how are we going to replicate this virtually? And I think my team, led by Dr. Tiffany Mfume, Assistant Vice President, and I know some of her, I saw Mr. Davis, the others of her team on here today, did a really fantastic job of building a virtual experience, right? And the innovation piece was, instead of trying to cram all that into a couple of days, and here we're going to be on Zoom all day long, and they built it out over pretty much the whole summer. Nice. Right, because there would be a lesson each week, and it was very interactive. There were and the whole campus, all the people who have to be involved with orientation, everyone did their part, came together, put together really nice presentations or interactive experiences with the students. And it was a way to keep students engaged all summer, right? Whereas typically you have them come in for summer orientation and then you pray, right? Fingers crossed that they're going to come back a few weeks later.
Don't ruin orientation.
For classes to start.
Exactly.
But this way you actually kept them engaged throughout the whole thing. And of course you can check online and see, okay, you didn't attend this week, so let me check in with you, that kind of thing. I think that worked really well. And we've tweaked it some, it was a little long. So that was maybe one of the things that lessons learned, right? It was long. We spread it out over the whole summer. And I think we shortened it some, tightened it up a little bit. But I thought it was a really good idea and something, again, that we wouldn't have done otherwise, but it was really engaging.
Yeah, and you think too, like I've been at places where you have your orientation and you come for a week, but classes might not start for another 6 weeks. And it's like, exactly. Not every student can do that. Like fly to this school, come back, and then return. So I think having the virtual orientation where a student doesn't necessarily have to do it that route is super important. And I know we're coming out on May 1st, but I want to jump ahead since we're talking about orientation. Plans for you all this upcoming summer. We know that MELT is a thing, and Dr. Turner, I think that you were kind of alluding to that and what you all plan to do with the orientation. Any other strategies that you all have in place to reduce that summer MELT? Because we know that that's such an issue for students, just getting them there. Everything is done and they might have that one piece of paperwork they're not familiar with and they don't know the office, so they just don't show up, which is what we don't want, right? So what are you all kind of planning to do to address that summer MELT piece this year?
So we always, we're big on outreach. So we do a lot of emails, phone calls kind of thing. But we've actually just signed up with AdmitHub to, so it's an automated kind of chat bot that can do texting to students and things. And so they really work a lot. They have the results from other institutions that they've worked with in terms of decreasing summer MELT. So that's in process right now. So we're looking forward to seeing the results of how implementing that this summer helps.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Dr. Scott?
Yes, so Dr. Turner mentioned this earlier, how important it is for students to get out and give tours and court incoming students and share their experiences. And you also mentioned campus life after 10. That's something that I can't discuss, but students can discuss it. We do have current students and student leaders texting as well. So they're texting with students, and then we are having signing day events and live events at alumni homes to celebrate the accomplishments of our students. Since we're technically not able to give campus tours yet, we're finding ways to meet in a COVID-friendly environment and limit the number of attendees so that we can get them engaged early.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's kind of important too. Like you said, having the opportunity to talk to your actual students about that campus life past 10 p.m. Like, school is all a holistic experience, and the campus life is certainly a part of that. And we want to be able to address and get students excited over the summer, right? Like, you get accepted, you're ready, and then you have like 3 months of this awkward kind of transition period. So making sure they're engaged over the summer and really excited to come to campus, and also know the resources and know the wayfinding to make it, a good first semester for them. Super important. Another question we have here, we're rolling. I'm gonna check the time because we're chatting over here. Can you give us some examples on how you reach high school seniors from maybe low income areas, and how you help guide them through the journey or through the application process? Like, any additional support or resources or programs or departments that help with that kind of outreach?
Yeah, so we have a recruitment team, and our recruiters are assigned to colleges, and they create relationships with the guidance counselors, and they host one-on-one sessions as well as virtual events with the guidance counselors at said high schools. We know where our students are coming from, so we're able to target which schools we want to visit, and oftentimes they are our low income or minority serving schools.
Right, same here. Certainly throughout the state of Maryland, we visit, pre-COVID, visit pretty much every high school, and certainly, many low-income high schools. We have our Bare Essentials Student Services Center, our one-stop shop that can answer questions for students. We have automated chat bot. We have live chat hours where we have live chat. So we try to always be available. Certainly our email. So we know the students have questions. And so we try to be very available to help them navigate the process.
And I know that we talked a little bit too about making sure that students are able to reach out to different folks, and the importance of things that we've learned from the pandemic that we want to bring forward, right? And we always want to keep. And I think one thing institutions have done as well is social media, right? And figuring out what channels work best. Dr. Scott, I know you talked about that Facebook group that kind of flew off the handle, and needing to kind of reel it back in and figure out, hey, this can work, but how do we do it? So in terms of social media, what have you all done to kind of stay engaged with students and use that as another outreach point for them to learn more about your universities and more about HBCUs and why they should consider attending?
So my team is, some of my members are on here. They are laughing right now as you say Dr. Turner and social media, because I don't do it. But I have a wonderful team, and they do all of that. And our public relations team also, they've done a really great job this year of even doing things like just flashback pictures and videos from like homecoming and different things to just remind people that this is what this is what campus is like, and we can't wait to get back. So between my wonderful admissions team and my special assistant and my EMAS team and our public relations team, they do a great job with social media.
Don't worry, I haven't posted on Instagram in like 7 years. I feel like some people might not know I still exist, so I'm with you. And to stay away as well. What about you, Dr. Scott? Social media?
Yes, and on this part, I compliment Dr. Turner. So I am someone who's always on social media. it's just the way of my life, I suppose. And all of our departments have their own social media channels. One of my favorite channels is the TSU Aristocrat channel. Most recently, they had a recording of themselves performing Leave the Door Open. I hope that song doesn't get stuck in your head after this call, but and it's just so cool to see our students engaging with each other and being their authentic selves on their pages. It seems like this generation wants to see that in some form or fashion. So even if we don't use our real personal social media, we use our TSU social media just to engage with students.
Yeah, I think this generation, when you think at least like the Gen Z, the influencer, they are always gonna kind of go to their peers, but they know when they're being marketed to in a very specific way, and they want those real answers. So I think for those students, a little bit more authenticity is what they're looking for when they're doing their college search. And one way that universities can do that is through their social media and highlighting, whether it's that Throwback Thursday or just being more fun, right? Like being less, okay, we get it, there's the quad, but like what happens on the quad? What else goes on there? What's the history of it? So I think getting a little bit more creative with it, super important for the students to actually get a better feel of what it might be like to be on your campus. And I know folks have more questions, but we're coming out of time, and I wanted to kind of do a wrap up one. Like we said, we cannot sing your praises enough in all HBCUs that have always been here, but really, this year just having the spotlight put on, and well deserved, obviously. And we want people on this call to be able to take things away from the things that you all were able to positively do. If they're anything like me, there's been a ton of good stuff. So I always like to kind of if you could just give folks, two things that you really encourage them to look into or to consider when it comes to enrollment and outreach and recruitment, that you would leave them with, what would those things be for the folks that decided to join us today?
This isn't necessarily related just to recruitment, because I do more than that. But I think one thing the pandemic has really helped us all see in higher ed is the need to be flexible and adaptable, and to be nimble, right? And I think you might have said something about, it usually takes a committee and a committee,
It would kill me every time.
Right. And so, no, we can't change that. Why? Because that's the way we've always done it, right? That kind of, and that's not just an HBCU thing. Like that's a higher ed thing, right? This sort of very conservative nature with that. But this has really forced us all to move out of that. And I hope we don't go back, right? It's forced us to think, well, why do we have to accept SAT scores? Why can't we just admit to other things? And why is this on paper? Yes, we can do all of those documents online. We really can, right? And just all of the things, and the faculty really can hold every single class online if you have to, right? And so all of the things that we've had to adjust to, that we wouldn't have, right? People would have kicking and screaming for the next 10 years, and a task force and a committee and another task force and all of that, right? That we've done, that we keep that open mind frame and think, well, maybe we should look at this and let's expand and let's innovate and do these things. So just keeping that openness and that nimbleness that we've had to do here, I hope we all keep post-pandemic.
You definitely triggered me when you said we've always done it that way, because there is nothing that gets me riled up more than someone saying it. Like, don't ever say that to any, have a better response to things, but I think you're totally right.
Even if they have the better response, that's really what, in the back of their mind, that's really what
we will never change. We don't care what happens, which is the silliest thing. Even when we were talking about maybe if it wasn't a pandemic, but demographics changing, right? When that happens, are we going to continue to do the same exact programs and have the same exact services? Or are we going to take a look at the student population now and figure out what they actually need? So you hit it on the head. If I was to pick one, that would also be mine. Keep an open mind and be nimble and be flexible, certainly. What about you, Dr. Scott?
Yeah, so the one I would like for us to take away is building a community. And another higher ed thing that seems to be recurring is operating in silos. And we were successful because we worked together and we didn't point to this department and say, hey, I don't do that. You talk to this person. We tried to find out, okay, I know I'm not the expert in this, but can you give me a template email to send them, so that we can try to reach out to them quickly? What can I do to help with mitigating this? I feel like the middleman, but I don't want to just tell them I can't help you. Because in this pandemic, we're dealing with students and the community that is really stressed out and just wanting someone to talk to them. One thing I've realized over this time is I've always known that people buy from who they like. And it was reinforced during this pandemic. People just wanted someone to listen and talk to them beyond if my kid got into school, or even the kid themselves, beyond them giving me their, spill on why they want to come to TSU. They wanted their stories to be heard. So I hope that we bring that with us. We don't operate in silos. We build more community, and we get to know people and see them for who they really are.
Wow, I love that. Did you know that was the way to wrap up? Because you just kind of put a nice little bow on pretty much everything that we've been talking about today. That was fantastic. I think it's always important, but I think it's one of those things where people really got to see what matters and what doesn't. And I think the pandemic forced that, but what you were saying, students want to share their stories. They want you to hear them and see them as an individual. And the less you can talk about your institution and try to sell that, and the more you can just talk to them, meet with them, because maybe you got to send them to Dr. Turner. Maybe they'd be better off at Morgan State for whatever reason, right? But getting to know them on that personal level makes a huge difference. And clearly you all are doing that because you're fantastic and awesome. And we really, on behalf of the kind of Unibuddy team, we really appreciate you all deciding to spend an hour with us and answer all these questions. So thank you both for joining, Dr. Scott, Dr. Turner, and then everyone on the call as well. Thank you. Hopefully you walked away with some insight. I know I'm, for one, fired up, and I really love the Master P reference. So I'll be thinking about that for the rest of the day. But thank you again, Dr. Scott and Dr. Turner. We really appreciate you all joining us. And thanks everyone else who logged on.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.